I'd like to begin by reading a short statement from Mrs. McArthur. So these are her words. I want to thank you all for coming, and especially to thank you for your prayers for Ron this past year. Thank you to Mike McLean and the whole college for this wonderful send-off, and for all the help that Ann Forsyth gave in coordinating everything. A special thanks to Lucinda and the kitchen staff for preparing and serving this delicious lunch. Ron's life was so bound up with this school, it is very fitting that we all come together today to observe his death. His love for the college never waned, even when he could no longer teach. He thought the college was now better than ever, and marveled at the caliber of the tutors and the desire to lead the students in truth. When God called him, he was happy to say, "Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will." May God bless you all. Thank you, Mr. McArthur. It's my honor and privilege to speak on behalf of the alumni of Thomas Aquinas College. I know my words will not do justice to all the things that we as alumni have received from the founding president, Dr. Ronald McArthur. I still have a vivid recollection of my first meeting with Dr. McArthur. I'd heard a talk by Dr. Neumeier in Bakersfield the spring before the college opened its doors. I was very impressed by Dr. Neumeier and by what he had to say about true Catholic liberal education. I decided to visit the campus and learn more about the program. Dr. Neumeier met me in the parking lot in front of the novitiate, where a small chapel and cafeteria were located. He showed me around and then took me over to the men's dormitory on the other side of the campus. This building had the dorm rooms for the men on the top two floors and the main chapel and offices on the main floor. As we were walking across the front lawn toward the building, I heard a big voice booming from inside the building. And Dr. Neumeier said, "That's the voice of Dr. McArthur." He said he must be talking on the phone long distance. The further the call, the longer he talks, or the louder he talks, excuse me. Moments later, Dr. McArthur came out to greet me. His stature and personality matched the voice I heard. Dr. McArthur said he was indeed talking long distance to a man from New York who called to tell me he was crazy for starting this new school. Dr. McArthur just laughed and said that these are the kinds of calls he gets all the time. He gave me the he gave me the confidence I needed to commit myself to this college. He had a confidence about what he was doing. He made it clear to me that his confidence did not come from the fact that it was his idea. He said that this is something the church has been doing since the Middle Ages. This is a traditional form of education, and his confidence came from the teaching church. I can honestly say that if it hadn't been for Dr. McArthur, I may not have stayed in the program. As students, most of us go through periods of doubt about whether all the work is really worth it. The fledgling program and the student life on campus had their hitches and glitches. But through all of this, Dr. McArthur was like a father to us. He took a personal interest in each one of us. He made it clear to us how much he appreciated the fact that we came to the college. Dr. McArthur told us that the founders had doubts about whether anyone would want to come to this college. But I remember how he loved to watch us play sports, and he would jokingly ask us afterwards, "Why did you come to the college? You could have played intercollegiate sports someplace else." Dr. McArthur took his meals with us. He talked to us about the importance of what we were learning. He kept his eyes on the morale of the students, gave us pep talks when we needed them, and kept us going by his love and concern. I was fortunate to have Dr. McArthur all 4 years. He was truly inspirational. His enthusiasm and love for what we were learning was contagious, although we may not have expressed it as outwardly as he did by pounding on the table and whacking people in the back. It was clear that his pleasure in teaching came from seeing his students learn. My freshman year, I had him for mathematics and philosophy. I recall how excited Ron would get when we did well on a difficult Euclid demonstration. It gave him the confidence that we were able to do the more difficult mathematical parts of the program, particularly Newton. Several times after class, our freshman year, he would tell us how great a mathematician Newton was and what a monumental work the Principia was, and how we should look forward to doing that our junior year. The same was true in philosophy. The study of logic can be rather dry, but Ron kept us motivated by telling us how important particular things we learned were for the studying of the higher things in philosophy and theology. As my classmate Rick Cross put it, Ron was not just a tutor, he was a coach. He enthusiastically affirmed us when we got things right, he gave us the motivation to work hard, and he kept us aimed in the right direction. Ron had a sense of humor to match his stature. He loved to laugh. I remember sitting with him on the steps of the men's dorm while he told some of his favorite jokes. They were mostly jokes about husbands and wives. I must admit that I didn't think they were quite as funny as he did. He would laugh long and hard after each joke and then rub his hands together. To give you an idea of what kind of humor he appreciated, during my sophomore year we were discussing the Poetics of Aristotle, and the question came up in our discussion of the definition of comedy. Aristotle says it's a species of the ridiculous. And I remember making the comment that, well, it can't be too ridiculous, because then it won't be funny. Lucille Ball, for example, in I Love Lucy is just too ridiculous to be funny. And my classmates were silent, and I looked at Ron, and Ron said, I laugh all the time. There are many times when Ron had the sense of humor and humility to be the subject of his own jokes. On one occasion, he told me how smart Mark Berquist was and how much deeper his understanding of St. Thomas and Aristotle Mark had than he. And Ron did his own doctoral dissertation on the distinction between universal and predication and universal and causality. And he asked Mark to read that for him and to see what he thought. Mark read it and came back to Ron, and according to Ron, Mark said, not too bad. Better than I was expecting. And Ron thought that was hilarious. One of Ron's favorite stories about the time he was in the classroom of a temporary dorm waiting for his students to arrive. And he looked out the window to see if there were any more students coming, and he saw Peter DeLuca, Jack Newmeyer, and Mark Berquist walking down the path toward the building. So he called his students over the window and he pointed out and he said, see those three guys? I know more than all of them put together. There was another occasion in which I thought Ron's humility was manifest. After Ron stepped down as president of the college, he was asked to come back to be the commencement speaker for the class of 1996. In the course of his remarks, and speaking of himself, he quoted the reference that John the Baptist made to Christ. He must increase, I must decrease. I was really profoundly moved by that remark. I've never forgotten it. There are two things about Dr. McArthur were clear to all of his students: his love of country and love of the church. He had a tremendous respect for the wisdom of the founding fathers of this country, for the Declaration of Independence, and for our Constitution. Yet he deplored the direction in which the country was headed. I was a student when the Roe versus Wade decision was handed down by the Supreme Court. He let us know that the decisions that legislatures and courts had made about marriage and about abortion would eventually lead to the downfall of this country. We watched together as the moral rectitude of our country quickly declined. His only surprise, he would say, was that it didn't happen more swiftly. He was amazed at the resilience of our society, but he knew that it couldn't keep going in the same direction. I'm only glad that he did not have to witness anything worse than what we are seeing today. Of more concern to Dr. McArthur, however, was what happened to the church after Vatican II. Catholic schools, colleges, and universities claimed autonomy from the teaching authority of the church. Seminaries corrupted the faith of young men who entered them. the number of priestly and religious vocations plummeted. It was to stem this tide that Dr. McArthur and the other founders started Thomas Aquinas College, and it was for the same reason that many of us came to the college as students. Ideas have consequences, he used to remind us. There was a great need for young men and women to be educated according to the wisdom of the Catholic tradition, more specifically, as the Church has most strongly recommended, the wisdom of St. Thomas and the tradition on which his philosophy and theology are based. What better way to stem the tide of errors of our time than to teach students the truths that we can know by natural reason and by those revealed by God through his Church, to teach students about the compatibility of faith and reason. Students need to be aware of errors, ancient and modern, to know where the mistakes are made, why they are made, and how to correct them. Dr. McArthur's hope was that armed with the faith, with the beginnings of wisdom in natural and divine things, and the love for God and his Church, our graduates would be a force for good in society. I dare say this is why most of us came to the college. We wanted this education so that we could be a leaven to society to defend the Church. And this was no matter what walk of life we chose, whether it was in the Church as a member of the clergy or religious order, in academia, or in any other walk of life. Ron also had a tremendous love for the liturgy, as we witnessed today. He saw the importance of liturgical practice in the life of faith. Lux orandi, lux credendi, as it is said in Latin. Ron resisted the experimentations of the liturgists. We stayed with the old rite as long as diocese would allow us. Ron and the other founders thought it was doubtful that the old rite had been abrogated, but they willingly submitted to the authority of our auxiliary bishop. Ron made sure that we used the options that kept our liturgy as traditional as possible. There's no doubt in my mind that our liturgical practices have fostered the faith and devotion of our students, and is one of the primary reasons we've had so many vocations to the priesthood and the religious life. Dr. McArthur, we thank you for founding Thomas Aquinas College, for dedicating most of your life to seeing that it prospered. We thank you for your example as a man who loved Christ and his Church above all things, for your example as a lover of wisdom. We thank you for being our teacher and our coach, our father and our friend. May God reward you abundantly for all you've done for us.